Welcome to our channel. Today we delve into the chilling world of night shift workers, those brave souls who navigate the eerie silence and unsettling darkness, often encountering the unexplainable. Tonight, we have three terrifying true horror stories that will send chills down your spine. These stories come from the depths of the internet, whispered accounts of people who faced the unknown during their lonely night shifts. Make sure to turn off the lights and get ready for a scare.
Imagine an old abandoned office building shrouded in darkness and mystery, the kind that creaks and groans with every gust of wind, its hollow halls echoing with forgotten conversations and the whispers of the past. Our story takes place in such a building, a skeletal monument to a bygone era, standing as a silent witness to the passage of time. Our protagonist, a seasoned security guard named Mark, had seen his fair share of unease and eerie occurrences. He'd patrolled quiet cemeteries, guarded desolate warehouses, and faced the unnerving silence of the night. But nothing could have prepared him for what awaited him within this desolate office building, a place where the past seemed to linger in every shadow. It was a night like any other, the clock ticking past midnight, the witching hour when the veil between worlds is said to be thinnest. Mark made his rounds, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silence, each step a reminder of his solitary vigil. As he rounded the corner into the executive wing, a cold shiver ran down his spine, a premonition of the unknown. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen presence, as if the building itself was holding its breath. His flashlight beam fell upon a figure standing at the end of the hallway, a silhouette that seemed out of place in time. A tall, shadowy figure draped in a long, flowing coat, its features obscured by the darkness. Mark froze, his heart pounding against his ribs, each beat a drum of fear. "Hello?" Mark's voice came out as a shaky whisper, barely audible over the oppressive silence. The figure remained motionless, the static sound intensifying, filling the air with an electric tension. He fumbled for his radio, but it remained stubbornly silent, as if the very air was conspiring against him. The figure began to move, gliding towards Mark with an eerie grace, its movements fluid and unnatural. The hum grew louder, morphing into a low, guttural moan that echoed through the hallway, a sound that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. He stumbled back, his hand instinctively reaching for his baton, a futile attempt to defend himself against the unknown. The figure continued to approach, its form becoming clearer, more defined, yet still shrouded in mystery. As the figure drew closer, the air grew colder, each breath a visible puff of mist in the frigid air. He opened his eyes slowly, his gaze cautiously scanning the hallway, searching for any sign of the figure. The figure was gone, leaving behind only the echo of the chilling moan and the lingering feeling of icy dread, a reminder of the encounter that would haunt Mark's memories forever.
Our next tale takes us to the sterile, brightly lit corridors of a bustling city hospital, a place where life and death often dance a delicate waltz, and where the unexpected is almost a daily occurrence. Our protagonist, a young nurse named Sarah, was no stranger to the strange occurrences that often plague the night shift. She had grown accustomed to the eerie silence that enveloped the hospital after hours, the kind that made every creak and whisper seem amplified. She had witnessed the fragility of life, the sudden shifts from hope to heartbreak. The emergency room was a place of constant flux, where emotions ran high, and the line between life and death was often blurred. But nothing could have prepared her for the encounter that awaited her on this particular night. It was an experience that would forever be etched in her memory, a chilling reminder of the unknown. It was nearing the witching hour, the time when the veil between the living and the dead is said to be at its thinnest. The hospital, usually a hive of activity, had quieted down to an almost eerie stillness. The usual cacophony of a busy hospital had dwindled to a low hum. The only sounds were the distant beeps of monitors and the occasional footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. Sarah was making her rounds, checking on her patients. She moved with practiced efficiency, her mind focused on the tasks at hand. As she approached room 312, a chill ran down her spine. It was as if the temperature had suddenly dropped and she could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She stopped outside the door, a sense of unease washing over her. The room seemed to exude a palpable sense of dread, and she hesitated for a moment before proceeding. The room was dark, the only light emanating from the hallway. Shadows danced on the walls, creating an almost surreal atmosphere. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was as if an invisible presence was watching her, waiting for her to make a move. Taking a deep breath, she knocked lightly and pushed the door open. The hinges creaked, adding to the already tense atmosphere. The room was empty, the bed neatly made. It was as if no one had been there at all. A wave of confusion washed over her. She distinctly remembered having a patient in that room earlier in the evening. Mrs. Eleanor Davis, an elderly woman with a kind smile and a gentle demeanor. She quickly scanned the room again, her mind racing. Where could Mrs. Davis have gone? There were no signs of a struggle, no indication that she had left on her own. She stepped back into the hallway, her eyes scanning the names and room numbers on the board. Maybe she had made a mistake. Maybe Mrs. Davis had been moved to another room. There it was, room 312, assigned to her, the patient's name clearly written next to it, Mrs. Eleanor Davis. But the room was empty, and there was no record of her being moved. A cold dread gripped her. She felt a sense of foreboding, as if something terrible was about to happen. She decided to check the nurse's station, hoping to find a logical explanation. Maybe there had been a mix-up, or maybe Mrs. Davis had been taken for some tests. As she approached the station, she noticed her colleague, Emily. Emily was busy with some paperwork, but she looked up as Sarah approached. "Emily!" Sarah called out. "Have you seen Mrs. Davis, the patient in 312? Her voice was tinged with urgency. Emily looked up, her eyes filled with confusion. "Mrs. Davis? Sarah, there's no Mrs. Davis in 312. That room's been empty all night." Her words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. A wave of dizziness washed over Sarah. She felt as if the ground was shifting beneath her feet. She felt a cold hand grip her heart, squeezing the air from her lungs. It was as if an unseen force was trying to suffocate her. As she did, her eyes fell on the monitor displaying the patient list. Her blood ran cold. The screen showed room 312 as occupied, but the name next to it was blank. There, on the screen, was room 312, listed as occupied, but the name next to it was blank. The name was blank. It was as if Mrs. Davis had never existed, as if she had been erased from reality itself.
Our final story of the night takes us to the fluorescent-lit aisles of a 24-hour convenience store on the edge of town. It's a place that never sleeps, a beacon of light in the darkness, offering a semblance of normalcy to those who wander in during the odd hours. Our protagonist, a young man named David, working the graveyard shift to make ends meet, found solace in the mundane routine. The rhythmic beeping of the cash register, the hum of the refrigerators, and the occasional small talk with regulars became the soundtrack of his nights. He had become accustomed to the night owls, the insomniacs, the truckers stopping for a quick coffee and a snack. Each had their own story, their own reasons for being awake when the rest of the world slept. But tonight, something was different, a shift in the atmosphere. There was an unsettling stillness in the air, a sense of anticipation that made the hairs on the back of David's neck stand up. The rain was coming down in sheets outside, a torrential downpour that lashed against the windows. The relentless drumming of the rain added to the eerie ambience, making the store feel like an isolated island in a sea of darkness. It was the kind of night that kept most people indoors, huddled under blankets, listening to the storm rage outside. But for David, it was just another shift, or so he thought. David was wiping down the counter, his mind wandering to thoughts of his upcoming exams and the bills he needed to pay, when the bell above the door chimed. The sound was sharp, cutting through the monotonous hum of the store. He glanced up, his eyes scanning the figure that had stepped in from the rain-soaked night. The figure was drenched, water dripping from the edges of a dark hooded raincoat. A man, tall and imposing, his features obscured by the shadow cast by the hood of his dark raincoat. There was something about him that set David on edge, a sense of foreboding that he couldn't shake. "Evening," David greeted the man. "What can I get for you?" His voice was steady, but his heart was beginning to race. The man didn't respond, his gaze never leaving David. His eyes were intense, almost piercing, as if he could see right through him. The man took a step closer, the fluorescent lights reflecting off his eyes. There was a coldness in them, a detachment that made David uneasy. "Sir," David tried again, "are you going to need anything?" His voice wavered slightly, betraying his growing anxiety. The man stopped just in front of the counter, his hands moving slightly. David's eyes followed the movement, his mind racing with possibilities. As a matter of fact, the man finally spoke. I'm looking for something specific. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that made David's stomach churn. David's heart was pounding in his chest, his hand instinctively reaching beneath the counter for the heavy iron wrench he kept there. It was a precaution, something he hoped he'd never have to use. Well, we've got a variety of... David's voice trailed off as the man suddenly leaned closer. The proximity made David's skin crawl, and he tightened his grip on the wrench. I'm looking for something, the man repeated. Something you possess. His words were cryptic, sending a shiver down David's spine. David's grip tightened on the wrench, his mind racing. What could this man possibly want from him? He had nothing of value, nothing worth this kind of confrontation. I don't understand, David stammered. His voice was barely above a whisper, his fear evident. The man chuckled, a low, guttural sound. It was a sound that sent chills down David's spine, a sound that spoke of hidden intentions. Oh, but you do, the man said. You just haven't figured it out yet. His words were laced with a sinister undertone, making David's blood run cold. The man straightened up, his gaze never leaving David, his hand moving slowly, revealing a small tarnished pocket watch. The sight of it made David's heart skip a beat. This, the man said, this belongs to you, doesn't it? His voice was calm, almost too calm, as if he knew something David didn't. The pocket watch glinted under the fluorescent lights, its surface marred by age and wear. David's mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle that had just been laid before him.
Thank you for watching. We hope you found these stories as chilling as we did. The darkness holds many secrets, and those who work in its embrace often find themselves face to face with the unexplainable. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more chilling tales. We're always on the lookout for new stories to share, so if you have one you'd like to submit, please leave it in the comments below. Stay safe and good night.